Sometimes you go about life and you think you have it all figured out. You think you've seen everything. You think you've tried everything to create the perfect image for you. The hard part about assumptions is while looking ahead, you miss the things that are right in front of you. There's some things that I feel like I've missed over the last couple of years, but I don't think I'm going to make the same mistake twice. Now, I'm going to admit, I kind of slept on the Laowa Nanomorphs for quite some time. In fact, when they first released them, I had a choice between getting the Laowa Nanomorphs and some other solutions that you've seen on this channel. But now that I've been using the 35mm and the 65mm anamorphic lenses, I've actually started to change my mind, so much so that I don't really think I need any other anamorphic lenses for my RED Komodo X. Now, in this redemption arc, one thing that I want to point out is that the Nanomorphs, as good as they look, are Super 35 lenses. So if you're someone using the Sony FX30 or the RED Komodo X just like I am, or any other Super 35 camera, these lenses are going to work with it. Now, I decided to get the PL versions for one reason is because I think they look better, but two, because I can use them with a PL adapter on any camera that I'm going to have in the future. Now, the Laowa Nanomorphs do have an amber, a blue, and the silver flares, which are the ones that I picked up. And I actually like neutral flares a little bit, which we'll talk about in another video, but the thing I like about these guys is that it does have a variety of different focal lengths. I've actually used the 35mm Sur Anamorphic lens, and it was great at 35mm, but the fact was that it only had 35mm. I didn't have any other options in terms of coverage, which kind of felt lacking. I can't shoot everything at 35mm anamorphic, and albeit it looks really good, there are some options I just can't get with only having one lens. Now, I do have the 65mm here, and Laowa sent me both of these lenses, but they also have an 80mm as well, which I'll leave a link in the description down below. And with having all three of those lenses and using some of the other lenses they've come out with already, you actually have a pretty decent kit. Now, build quality with cinema lenses are just getting better in general, especially at the lower price points. Like, this is still made out of a pretty sturdy metal housing, and I always mention build quality with lenses, but that's because I'm pretty rough with my stuff. I'm shooting handheld all the time. I'm shooting a lot of sports and fitness stuff, and sometimes you might take a tumble, and sometimes you gotta be a little bit tougher on your gear, and everything can't be pristine. So having a better build quality at a lower price actually makes a lot of sense, and it does go quite a long way. At the same time, if I ever decide I want to sell this or upgrade, it also holds up pretty decently. These also do have a 77mm filter thread across the entire set, which makes things easier because 77mm is a pretty common filter thread, but I could also use things like diopters to make up for the poor minimum focusing distance on anamorphic lenses, which we'll also talk about later in this video. Now, the gears and the iris are in the exact same place, but one of these lenses is a little bit bigger than the other. The 65 is slightly bigger than the 35mm. Now, the 35mm is only about a pound and some change, but the 65mm is actually a little bit heavier, but not by much. It's still going to be great for gimbal work and matching things up to different rigs that you're going to have. Now, for those of you guys that don't know a lot about anamorphic lenses, you're going to get something called a squeeze factor. Now, what a squeeze factor actually does is it stretches the horizontal width of your image while still maintaining the compression of the focal length you're going to be using. So, for example, the 35mm lens, what's going to happen is that you're still going to get 35mm of compression, but you're going to get more like a 23mm look. And when I was using the Sur-Rays, I found a problem with that because 23mm is great, but at the same time, it's not going to be able to be used in every single shot that I want to do. I need to get something that's a little bit tighter for close-ups and just generally to get coverage. And on the 65mm, you're still going to get that heavy compression at 65mm, but you're getting a 43mm look, which actually looks really, really good. And at the same time, you get the width and you also get that depth of field. Now, right now, I'm going to be recording on the 35mm Laowa Nanomorph in the silver reflection, and even just looking at my monitor over here, it's it's actually pretty sharp. A lot of modern day lenses are still going to maintain that sharpness, and the Laowa Nanomorphs being a modern lens, although anamorphic, is still going to have a lot of detail and sharpness in it, which is more than fine because I could always use things like filtration, or I could fix it in post in order to kind of push and pull the image however I want it to. Now, I did pick silver flaring, so I am going to show you what those look like. I'm just going to turn on my phone here. There you go. There we go. So we do have a silver flare that's going to go onto here. You can see that streak. Now, the silver flare isn't just there, but it also reflects the color of the light that I have that's in that light source. Now, that might sound a little bit weird, but essentially, if I had a red light here, the flaring would be red. If I have an orange light like the sun, then it's going to be more on an orange side of things. I kind of like the silver flaring, even though Cam might kill me for saying this. I like it because it makes things look natural. And in my lighting and in my style of filmmaking, I kind of want to make things look as natural as possible. Even if there's a light or there's an anamorphic lens, I still want things to kind of look like a happy accident. But this is what the 35mm looks like in a more controlled environment. Now, we're shooting on the 65mm Nanomorph as well. Now, this is the new guy, and you can pick it up on Indiegogo in the link in the description, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Now, with 65mm, I'm still getting that 65mm compression, but when I go down to 1.5 times the squeeze factor, the width is more like a 43mm look. Now, I don't have the 80mm, but you can get that as well. But when I was using the Sur Anamorphics, the 35mm, I only had that as an option. I didn't get the coverage that I wanted, so if I needed tight shots or if I wanted to move farther back from my subject, you only had that 35mm, which isn't the best in getting a versatile amount of shots. Sometimes you just need 2 or 3 lenses to get the looks that you want to, and having this neutral flare, which I'll show you in a second, having this neutral flare is actually great because it still adopts the light source, but at the same time, I could still get all the focal lengths that I want. Also, just like the other lenses, this one's kind of sharp, but I have no problems with it. I could always add some diffusion, some glow, and some grain, and you've probably already seen that in some of these images already, so it does look pretty good. Now, I am trying to make sure that I'm focusing on a little 5-inch monitor. I would recommend getting a slightly bigger monitor. 5 inches isn't enough in terms of your anamorphic footage. When manual focusing, it's a little bit harder, so you might want to opt for bigger monitors. Now, right now I am using the port keys, but I should have gone to my OC 7-inch, but it wasn't going to fit on this monopod. But let's just move on with the video and talk more about these lenses. Now, both these lenses do suffer from a similar con, but it's across the board with anamorphic lenses, and that's going to be the minimum focusing distance, and it's not the greatest in the world. Oftentimes with anamorphic lenses, what ends up happening is that you can get some pretty decent images, but you kind of got to get back. Now, the way that you can mitigate this is using something called diopters. Now, I forgot to bring my diopters in this particular review, but we're going to transition on set, and I'm going to use some diopters to explain what they mean. I did grab these from Vivitar. I'll put a link in the description down below. But how ND filters work like sunglasses for your lens, these are kind of like magnifying glasses. So that way, even at minimum focusing distance, you're still able to get things in focus. Now, this set does have a couple of different strengths. There's a +1, a +2, a +4, and a +10 if you want to get macro shots on an anamorphic lens. Now, if you're somebody that wants to be a little bit more versatile, maybe you only have one of these lenses and you want to be able to get some close-up shots, then you could actually use these guys in order to lower your minimum focusing distance, and that way you can still get a close-up and you can use anamorphic lenses at the same time. I find that when I'm looking for lenses, if I like the look of one of them, then I want to pick them up in different focal lengths. And if you want to pick these guys up, the 35mm is already available. You can get this in PL, EF mount, and a variety of others on B&H. But if you want to look at the 65 or even the 85mm, which I didn't test out in this video, right now it's actually on Indiegogo, and they're probably going to ship them soon. Now, if you are looking for the Indiegogo campaign to get something like the 65 or the 80mm, you can actually pick this guy up for about $1,400. And when you compare that to some of the other anamorphic lens sets that are on the market, it's actually a steal. Even though Atlas has 2 sets of anamorphic lenses, and DZO just came out with theirs, and even Viltrox has their own anamorphics, the price and the value you can get out of these guys at a 1.5 times squeeze, it's 2.4, which is great in low light. They're super light for gimbal work and shooting handheld, and you can definitely get more than one of them. I still think this is a great value pickup, and as well as you could pick the flaring that you want, so you don't really feel like you're missing out on the characteristics that you want, and if you always want to change them, you could just trade with a friend, if you have friends that buy lenses like that. That being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, or at the very least you guys learned something, and you got to see some of the anamorphic lenses by Laowa in action. I'm probably going to leave a video about my RED Komodo X review, but that day might not be today, so you're going to have to be okay with another video instead. Sorry about that. See you later.